Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Wilson Jr., and this is the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast, the music podcast on where I interview singers and musicians from genres of black music: gospel, jazz, blues, old school classic soul, old school hip hop, today's hip hop and R&B, Caribbean, Latin, Afrobeat, Afro-Latina, blue-eyed soul, disco, go-go, line dances, and the Lost 45s. So come with me as I take you on to a trip to the destination genre of black music right now on the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Legal Shield is a proud sponsor of the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Have you been involved in any types of accidents? Have you been a victim of identity theft? Have you been a victim of a computer fraud scam? Have you been in disputes with your tenants or landlords? If your loved one dies and they didn't write up a will for you or for your family, or you and your spouse are filing for divorce, or if you need help by opening up your small business, give Legal Shield a try. Visit their website at LegalShield.com and tell them you heard it here on the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Do it today. You'll be glad you did. Welcome to the season premiere of the Black Soul Music Experience. I'm Sam Wilson Jr., and this is season number 5. And this gentleman that I'm about to introduce to you, and yes, he is our guest as we start off season number 5. And as I said, this gentleman that I'm about to introduce is a jazz saxophonist who has collaborated with Indian musicians. He has been called the pioneer of North Indian classical jazz. He is the founder of the band Natra, that spells Natraj, silent J, and you can check out some of his music videos right now on YouTube. So please help me welcome to the Black Soul Music Experience, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Phil Scarff. Hi, Phil. How are you?
I'm fine, Sam. Thank you so much for having the program.
As always, welcome to my show. Glad to have you here as we start off with season number 5. And as always, we get to these technical difficulties, but since I'm doing it old school, and I remember the way when Walter Cronkite usually interviews a person, but you don't see the person's picture on the screen. So that's how I was raised on. I was raised up on Walter Cronkite, so we're going to do it old school. So you agree?
Sounds good to me.
Alrighty. So, as I said, welcome to season number 5. Pleasure to have you here. And as always, America doesn't know who you are. The world doesn't know who you are. So it's my duty to interview you as we start off season number 5. So let us begin, shall we? Now, where were you born?
I was born in Reading, Pennsylvania. Almost the Reading Railroad. If you ever played, I remember the Reading Railroad.
Ah, you said Reading, Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I know the area because it's known for its clothing outlets. And my first time going to Reading, Pennsylvania was on this shopping trip with some of my friends. So I've been to Reading, Pennsylvania back in 1981 and in 1982 and then again in 1983. So I'm no stranger to that area.
Okay.
Now, were your parents or any of your family relatives were in the music industry, or did they had 9 to 5 day jobs?
Okay, so my mom was vocalist, and she sang, primarily sang religious music, church, and the choir. In her early days, she also directed a youth choir as well, and she also played piano. And another interesting thing is that my grandmother, who I never knew, because passed away before I was born, lived on a farm in Maryland, and she played guitar, piano, and cornet. And she played the cornet in the town band. So I'm always um, amazed at the diversity of the instruments that she plays. Be able to manage these completely different instruments, and also, especially in those days, imagine having a woman playing the cornet in the town band, because the cornet, the trumpet, flugelhorn, these are even today dominated by men, and back in those days, probably even more so. So yeah, so that's my family background.
And which high school did you go to?
I went to Muhlenberg Township High School, which is just outside of Reading. And I just want to also mention that in this area, they're very big. They're very big on concert bands, and every little town has its own band. There are lots of outdoor concerts in the summer, and I played in a few of these different bands. One is the Ringgold Band in Reading, and some other area bands in the smaller towns, outlying towns as well.
And which college did you go to?
Sure. So I went in my undergraduate program. I went to Lehigh University, which is in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and for graduate school, I went to UC Berkeley. In both cases, a major part of my decision making was related to the musical opportunities at these places. At Lehigh, I played in the concert band, the wind ensemble, jazz band. I also played in an informal jazz quintet, used to jam on Sunday afternoons. And then when I went to UC Berkeley, I played in the Wednesday band, and I also played in a combo. Both are award-winning groups.
And what was your major in college?
Yeah, so my major was electrical engineering.
Now, who did you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I was a very avid rock collector in my early days, and I wanted to be a geologist initially. And then later, I kind of shifted my thought process towards engineering. I used to fool around with wiring stuff. I had a model train set that I used to, wire up the tracks, the switches, lights, and whatnot. And I also like to take stuff apart and use motors from like old clocks and things like this to build various gizmos. So I wound up going into electrical engineering probably as a result of all this.
Now, how old were you when you started playing musical instruments?
Sure. So when I was 8 in my third grade, I started playing piano, but I was not too fond of it. I sort of broke through it for about maybe half a year or so, and then I gave up. And then the next year, when I was 9, I took up the clarinet based on a demonstration in school. And then a year and a half later, I started playing saxophone at the request of my band director.
Was being a jazz musician your calling?
Well, I think so, because as I think about this question, I hadn't really thought of it that way before, but I'm glad you asked me this question, because I think, I've always been drawn to improvisation and collaboration with other musicians, which are really hallmarks of jazz. And I think that the same tendency also is what drew me into Indian classical music as well.
Now, growing up, who were some of your favorite jazz musicians?
Yeah, sure. So when I was in high school, I became interested in jazz, and I was listening to people like Coltrane, Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, Sonny Rollins, Wayne Shorter, Dexter Gordon, Joe Henderson, and of course my list has a lot of saxophonists because I played saxophone. So yeah, those were my kind of high school favorites.
And who were your musical influences that had inspired you to play instruments?
Right. So, of course, people I just mentioned were big influences. But then, in addition to that, because I played in the high school jazz band, so I got interested in big bands like Count Basie, Woody Herman, Stan Kenton, Major Ferguson, Duke Ellington, Buddy Rich. I went out to hear a lot of these people play. I had got their records, and so forth. So these are early influences in my musical days.
Now, how did you become the pioneer of North Indian classical jazz musician?
So, pioneer of adapting North Indian classical music to soprano saxophone, because I started this back in the mid '80s, and at that time there really weren't any saxophonists playing North Indian classical music, and so I had no one to study with or learn how to do this from, so who played saxophone. So, but what happens is that as a jazz musician, as I mentioned before, I was really very interested in improvisation, and especially seeking out different approaches to improvisation. And so when I came across Indian classical music, I became very intrigued by this because it has a completely different approach in many ways to improvising compared to jazz. And I found it very interesting and challenging and intriguing. So over the course of a few years of being exposed to this music, I decided that I should start to study it. And I further decided that I'm going to adapt it to soprano saxophone rather than trying to take on the added challenge of learning to play, say, Indian classical instruments like sitar or sarod or santoor or bansuri or something like that. I decided, saxophone, in this lifetime, saxophone is my instrument, so I am going to play music on saxophone. So that was my approach, and so then I started studying in Boston, where I was living at that point. But then fairly quickly, I think I studied about 9 months in Boston. Then I went to India and started studying India.
Now,
So I would like to mention to clarify one point. So there are two classical traditions in India. There's North Indian classical music and South Indian classical music. In North Indian classical music, even today, there are very, very few saxophonists. There's a handful of them in the world, and most of them don't live in India. However, South Indian classical music has really gravitated towards saxophone. Dr. Gopalnath was an early pioneer of performing South Indian classical music on saxophone, and he became very popular, and so there are quite a few South Indian classical saxophonists. But that's a different tradition from the North Indian music.
now, how did you came up with naming your jazz band Natra?
Yeah, so Natraj, this is a good story. So on my first trip to India to study Indian classical music, my guru was Surya Kalatkar, and towards the end of my trip, there was a going away party for me. Actually, the night before I was leaving, there was a going away party for me. And my guru's son and his daughter-in-law came to this party, and they gave me a present. And the present they gave me was a small statue of Natraj. And Natraj is the dancing image of Shiva. Natraj is depicted feeding out the cosmic pulse of the universe, destroying ignorance, and renewing life's energy. And that statue of Natraj still sits in my music room today on the shelf, watching over me as I practice every day.
Now, how would you describe your jazz sound? Is it classical music mixing with rhythmic world music?
Okay, to some extent it is like that, but there are a lot of other things too. So Natraj integrates elements of jazz, North Indian classical music, and also some South Indian classical music that we have learned along the way, collaborating with South Indian classical musicians. We also have influences from West Africa, from two traditions in Ghana, and we also have a segment of our repertoire that is influenced by music of Senegal, because we have a collaborator who joins us, a guest artist who joins us from time to time from Senegal, percussionist. And so we have some Senegalese influences in our repertoire also. And so, but the way we combine the music, it's not just about rhythm. It's using all aspects of these music. So it's rag, it's the form, it's the development of how the development framework and the improvisation works. It's also about rhythmic structures and all these things combined. And so we take different elements, combine them in different ways, in different pieces. And then fractals. I also have a piece that's based on bird songs that I heard in Hermanus, South Africa. So it has a bit of more diverse influence in the mix.
How many years was your jazz band was in existence? I think you mentioned back in the early 80s. Is that correct?
Yeah, so not right. So I first started studying Indian classical music in 1985. I went to India in 1986 to study there, and I formed Natraj in 1987. So it's been together for quite some time now. We're starting to get approach 40 years. I guess it's 38 years at this point. And the other group I mentioned, the Phil Scarff group, was founded around 2012.
And how many CDs did you and the band release so far?
Yeah, so I have a total of 46 titles, CDs and DVDs. Natraj has, of those, Natraj has 5 CDs. The most recent release we have is called Ragmala Paintings Alive, which is on Big Round Records. And this is a very interesting release. It's the musical part of a multimedia work. This multimedia work involves dance as well as music and spoken word and special effects. And it features Natraj playing the music, and also we have Indian classical dancer Jayashree Paula Rajamani joining us for the multimedia presentation. So, and the work, when I proposed the pieces, this work is based on historic Ragmala paintings from India, which were created between about the 1500s and 1700s all across North India. And in these paintings, each painting typically represents one rag. And we selected 8 of these paintings for our multimedia work. Jayashree and I selected the paintings, and she developed a storyline for each painting. And so when I composed the music, I based the music on both the paintings and inspiration from the storylines as well. And so this suite, which is based on the Ragmala painting, I also have some inspiration from Modest Mussorgsky and his iconic work, Pictures of an Exhibition. And in that work, he incorporates promenades. And the promenades represent the viewer entering the gallery and moving about the gallery. And so I borrowed that idea and kind of took it a bit forward, and I created several promenades. Each one is based on a different setting of the same melody. Actually, he did the same thing. He took the same melodic sequence and he said it differently in each promenade. So I took that and also did the same kind of thing. I took one melody and I said it different ways. So it starts out as an Indian classical composition, fast tempo. Then it moves, in the next promenade, it becomes a West African song. In the next promenade, it becomes a tango. In the next promenade, it becomes an Indian folk song. And so in each case, the promenade introduces some aspect of one of the upcoming movements. And so that's I think one of the very interesting aspects of Ragmala Paintings Alive. So moving on, the Phil Scarff Group has one CD called 3 Minutes Before, which is on Whaling City Sound. And this features almost all original compositions by Lewis and me. I already mentioned something about these compositions before with fractals and 12-tone rows and bird songs, etc. And then I have 3 Indian classical releases, all on Galloping Ghosts. The most recent is called Rag of the Radiant Moon. These releases were all recorded either entirely or partly in India in concerts that I presented in India. And Rag of the Radiant Moon is also partly recorded in virtual concerts that I gave during the pandemic. And then in addition to that, I'm featured on the remainder of the 46 Ds. I'm featured on with other groups such as Aardvark Jazz Orchestra, the Jazz Composers Alliance Orchestra, Jazz Composers Alliance Saxophone Quartet, Odd Song, Sandy Prager, and also I have a new release out with a group based in Bengaluru, India called Port Ara, which was recorded this past January 2025 when I was touring India.
Now, you and your band has toured here in the United States and around the world. Which country did you perform has given you a standing ovation?
Okay, so we have had standing ovations many times in the U.S. and in India
Now, I got a chance to check out some of your music video samples on YouTube, including the one Raga Poria. Classical smooth jazz, laid back, Miles Davis Wayne shorter type. What was that song about?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the Rob Foria that's on my website, philscarff.com website, which is in the medium 16-beat cycle. It was composed by Ustad Fayaz Khan, who was the vocalist. And so I'm going to give you the translation of the lyrics. So I hope you're buckled down for this very interesting set of lyrics here. Here we go. I'm off frolicking with my lover. I go devotionally to the edge of the water tank. I'm afraid of my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law. My other in-laws are going to trouble me too. This is what troubles the lover all day. Now this set of lyrics maybe seems a bit unexpected for Indian classical composition, but actually this is kind of typical. Many of the compositions are based on, I'll say, the text that comes from this mythical, sort of mythical Hindu land of Vrindavan and involves Krishna. So this particular composition does not mention Krishna, but it's referring to Krishna here. Krishna is the lover being referred to. And so another interesting thing, which seems a bit contradictory, but again, it's not uncommon, is that this composition was written by a Muslim, Ustad Fayaz Khan, though it's based on Hindu lyrics. So very interesting cross-cultural aspect to this.
Wow, thanks for explaining that because I would not know the title of the song. Now, I also got a chance to check out your other video samples on YouTube. The one playing was Tamsin Samaridit, and that was in 2015. What was it like collaborating with the Indian artist and Hira Music?
Sure. So I have done many collaborations with Indian artists, both in the conjunction with performances with Natraj, also with the Scarff group, and also in Indian classical settings where I have joined with other Indian classical musicians. And both North Indian and South Indian musicians, or I say musicians from both of those traditions. I have worked with many of them. So, first of all, I would like to say that, as I mentioned before, North Indian classical music is a highly improvised form, as is jazz. And so really what's happening these days when I collaborate in an Indian classical concert, it's really basically jamming on stage with other musicians. But to get to the point where you can jam with North Indian classical musicians, you need to know a lot of things, right? You need to understand the rag and the grammar, the composition, the form, the developmental framework, the rhythmic structures. All these things you have to have under control before you can really get to the point of jamming with the other musicians. And there also, as in any situation like this where there's a lot of improvisation and collaboration going on, you can run into surprises. And it's interesting what the things that have happened to me. For example, we may have a rehearsal and we'll play a particular composition, a particular segment of the performance, and then we get to the stage and my fellow musicians start playing a different composition that was not in the rehearsal and I had never heard before. And now I have to join in on that composition. Or another thing that can happen is in some of the pieces we have these very complex rhythmic endings, and so we may rehearse, the ending for the piece, but then we get to the stage, and lo and behold, the musicians start playing a different ending that we didn't rehearse, and have to pick it up on the spot. So these are some of the challenges I face, but it's a lot of fun, and it's very deep music, and it's it's basically jamming, and you just have to kind of understand the framework you're dealing with as the music, how it works, in order to do
like I say, jazz all around the world, no matter what taste. Because I listen to some of the jazz musicians myself all around the world as well. So thanks for educating me on that.
For
Now,
sure.
yes. Now, here's a question that I always ask my guest: living or dead, which jazz artist you wish you wanted to meet or to perform with?
Well, sure. I would say at the top of my list, I would have Coltrane, Miles Davis, Sonny Rollins, but I would also include Paul Winter and Glenn Velez as well. And I mean, the list would probably be endless, really, but these would just become people that come to mind.
Yes. Now, here on the Black Soul Music Experience podcast, I always ask my guests who are the favorite top 10 R&B black artists of all time. Now, since I have you, Phil, on my episode as we start off season number 5, we're about to do the top 10 jazz artists of all time. Now, here's how it works. We started like a top 10 countdown, like the TV show America's Top 10, hosted by the late Casey Kasem. We will start by the bottom 5, and we'll always figure out who was the best jazz artist but didn't get any recognition. And then when we get to the top 5, we will find out who was the best selling jazz artist of all time. That jazz artist received some top 10 jazz hits, whether it's on Billboard's classical or contemporary or today's smooth jazz singles charts, or did they cross over to the today's hip hop and R&B scene, or did that artist receive the gold album or platinum or double platinum or triple platinum? Did that artist won a Grammy or an NAACP Image Award or BET Award? Or did that artist perform on American Bandstand or Soul Train or The Midnight Special or NBC Saturday Night Live or Solid Gold? Or did they perform on PBS, whether it's on Great Performances or they had their own special during Pledge Month? Or did they had their prime time special, whether it's on CBS or NBC or ABC? Or did that artist perform live and had their own concert special on HBO or Showtime? So, Phil, are you ready to take that challenge?
Well, I'm ready to give you my list, and I would say this before I give you the list, that it's extremely difficult to identify only 10. And furthermore, it's even harder to put them in any kind of order. But I'm happy to give you what I came up with. And shall I give you from starting with number 10 and moving up to number 1, or how do you want to work this?
We'll start at the bottom with number 10, and then we'll work up to number 1.
Okay. Are you ready?
We're ready. We'll start at number 10.
Okay. Here we go. Number 10 is Paul Winter. The reason why I put him on the list is because he incorporated nature into his music with animal calls like wolf howls and whale calls, etc. And also the Paul Winter Consort spawned through Oregon and early efforts in world music jazz fusion, particularly using Indian influences. So that's number 10, Paul Winter.
Okay.
Number 9.
Number 9.
Yes, number 9, Ornette Coleman, who was the pioneer of free jazz with his characteristic harmonic approach. Number 8. Are you ready for number 8?
Yes, number 8.
Okay, now number 8 is an interesting one. He's not strictly speaking a jazz musician, but number 8 is Zakir Hussain, who collaborated with many musicians across many idioms, including many jazz musicians. And he was, of course, a stellar Indian classical musician, but also a fantastic, I'll say, Indo-jazz fusion musician as well. And as I said, he collaborated with many jazz musicians, and so I am including him on the list as number 8.
Okay, let's go for number 7.
All right, now number 7, I say Duke Ellington. And the reason why I I chose Bellington here is because I feel that he is one of the big band leaders who helped to move the big band from the dance floor to the concert stage. He treated his band in some ways more like a symphony orchestra than a dance band. And he also wrote for specific individuals in the band. He didn't just write, okay, I'm going to have a sax solo here, a trumpet solo there, a bass solo here. He wrote for the specific musicians, this is going to be Johnny Hodges, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I chose Bellington as number 7.
Okay, who should be at number 6?
Number 6 is Dizzy Gillespie. And Dizzy Gillespie is on this list as number 6 because he was a co-inventor of bebop, and he also incorporated early Latin influence into jazz.
Okay, he's best known for the cheekbones. So when you start playing that instrument, his cheekbones always go big. So that was something that I'm interested in.
And the bent trumpet bell also.
Okay, who should be at number 5?
Yeah, number 5, I put Thelonious Monk, who was also a co-inventor of bebop, and he had a very angular melodic style, very characteristic.
Okay, Thelonious Monk, good choice, number 5. All right, who should be at number 4?
Number 4, I chose Louis Armstrong, who was an early jazz innovator, vocalist and trumpet artist.
Ah, yes, Satchmo, best known for the first pioneer of jazz. He's been around for all through those years. Not only started playing some crossover jazz like Hello Dolly, but also he performed the song What a Wonderful World. I know that that song has been used in the movie Good Morning Vietnam, starring the late Robin Williams. And also his other song, We Have All of the Time in the World. And that was from the 1969 James Bond 007 movie on Her Majesty's Secret Service. So Louis Armstrong had done it all. He lived up until he passed away in 1971. But he'll be remembered for all of those tunes and crossover tunes as well. All right, who should be at number 3?
Number 3, Charlie Parker, also known as Bird, who was another co-inventor of bebop, which incorporated complex harmonies and fast lines. So I put it at number 3.
Okay, the Bird, Charlie Parker. Who should be at number 2?
Okay, we're closing in here to the top of the list now. Number 2 is John Coltrane. And the reason why I put Coltrane at number 2 is because he advanced the sound of the tenor saxophone. He changed it actually completely. And he was on the forefront of first create a head jazz with post-bop, and then moved into more exploratory free jazz. And he was also an early adopter of Indian influences. For example, his early hit, My Favorite Thing, features a very interesting thing. The bass player pedaled from beginning to end. He just pedaled straight through on the tonic, which is very reminiscent of the role of the tambura in Indian classical music. And the tambura is a string instrument that plays the drone, over which the melody happens. So in this case, the bass is basically droning on the tonic, and the melody and improvisation happens on top of that.
Wow. In case you may not know, I have the CD, John Coltrane, My Favorite Things. We all know it as a Christmas song, but then John Coltrane took that song, stripped it, and stretched it as far as wide as the eye can see. 13 minutes. Let me tell you, when I was playing that instrumental from the late John Coltrane, who never knew that holiday song become a jazz tune, 13 minutes. All right, who should be at number 1?
Okay, number 1, if you're ready, Miles Davis. And the reason why I put Miles Davis at number 1 is because he started off playing bebop, but then he was at the forefront of several different movements in jazz, starting cool jazz, moving to modal jazz, then moving to post-bop, then moving into jazz rock fusion. So he was a true innovator. He kept innovating and innovating throughout his entire career.
Yes, the one and only Miles Davis. He did it all, whether it's bebop or classic traditional jazz. And then during the end of the 60s into the 70s, he got into fusion jazz. And then by the 80s, he started doing remakes, including Michael Jackson's Human Nature and Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time. And yes, he was the first jazz artist to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, rest in peace to the one and only Miles Davis. Well, Phil, it's been a pleasure having you here on the Black Soul Music Experience podcast as we start off season number 5. And as always, we get these technical difficulties, but we always have a backup plan. So I was raised on the late Walter Cronkite, so we would always talk to someone over the phone. So as always, as my late mother will always say, somebody's got to pick up the torch and everything. So again, thank you so much for being here on my show as we start off season number 5.
Well, thank you, Stan, so much for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And I also have fond memories of Walter Cronkite. So I'm very happy we were able to talk on the phone, and it's a real pleasure.
Okay. Now, before we go, where can we follow you for any upcoming events? And where can we follow you on social media?
Okay. So, first of all, I have 3 websites. PhilScarff.com, which is PhilScarff.com, where I mainly focus on my Indian classical music, but it's also a bit more general about what I do. Then there's NatrajMusic.com, N like Nancy, ATRAJ, MUSIC, music.com, where I post information about Natraj, upcoming gigs, and releases. And then there's PorterScarff.com, that's PorterScarff.com, which is for the Louis Porter Phil Scarff group. And all 3 of these groups also have Facebook pages. So if you go to Facebook and just type in these 3 names, you'll find a Facebook page as well, where we post photos and videos and whatnot, announcements of upcoming concerts, etc.
Okay. Download all of the jazz artists that we have talked about on this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Visit iTunes.com, Spotify.com, or purchase a CD at Amazon.com. And make sure you follow Phil Scarff. Go to his website, philscarff.com, and also natramusic.com, porterscarff.com, and you can follow all of his information. Go to facebook.com to all of the information that I've just mentioned. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to check out this episode, please subscribe by going to the link. The link is riverside.fm/studio/Samuel-Wilson Jr.'s. Don't forget to add the S at the end, -studio. And yes, I will be posting this episode on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you have a hard time getting on to riverside.fm, then please become a member and subscribe to patreon.com/the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. All you need to do is go into the Patreon homepage, put in your email address and your password, then go to the Patreon homepage where you see all of the Patreon shows created by all the creators. And make sure you go to the top and type in the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Check out all of my audio podcast episodes and video podcast clips that you may have missed. And if you have a hard time getting on to patreon.com, then yes, I will be posting this episode on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, go to the YouTube homepage, and make sure you type in the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Check out all of my video podcast episodes from last season, season 4. And if you like this episode, if you love this podcast, please subscribe, please support, please give me a thumbs up, please leave a comment, and please pass it on. Thank you for joining me as I close out this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience. Well, that's about it for this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. I'm Sam Wilson Jr. Thank you for joining me, and please tune in next week for an all-new episode. The Black Soul Music Experience podcast is sponsored by the support of listeners and viewers like you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe by going to riverside.fm/studio/Samuel-Wilson Jr.'s-studio. And don't forget to check out my audio and video podcast episodes by becoming a member and subscribe to patreon.com/the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. And also check out my video podcast episodes by subscribing to youtube.com/the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. And please leave your comments, feedbacks, and replies by going to my Facebook homepage. Go to facebook.com/the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. And you can also tweet me on X, aka Twitter, at Sam Wilson Jr. 66. As always, partying, remember this: reach for the top and your dreams will come true, and it can happen to you. From all of us, take care, God bless, thanks for tuning in, have a good week, and please be safe.